A young man lay asleep on his bed in his apartment. The shrill chime of an alarm woke him. He rose, glanced toward the window where morning light seeped through, and went to the bathroom, rubbing his eyes. He paused before a large mirror, studying his reflection. He lowered himself to the sink, reached for his toothbrush and toothpaste, and brushed his teeth. He stepped into the shower and let the water rinse away sleep. He emerged with a towel wrapped around his waist, crossed the room, selected a simple outfit from the wardrobe, dressed, and went to the kitchen for a quick meal. After breakfast, he returned to his room, grabbed his phone and car keys from the nightstand, noted the time, and headed to the door. He stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the garage level, and walked to his car when the doors opened. He started the engine, drove out of the parking space, and headed toward campus. He arrived at the lecture hall on campus and scanned the room for familiar faces. He moved toward an empty seat near the back when a voice called his name. He recognized Logan and walked over to join him and their mutual friends. Ethan greeted the group. Logan shifted to make room for Ethan and asked if he had done the assignment, wanting to copy it before the lecture started. Ethan sighed, brushed Logan's hand away, then handed over the assignment after unzipping his bag. Hills and Ella joined the conversation, teasing Ethan about helping them copy the work. The lecturer arrived 20 minutes later and the session began. After 3 hours, everyone rose and left for their next class. After his final class ended around 4 p.m., Ethan said quick goodbyes to his friends, went to the parking garage, and got into his car. He rested his head against the steering wheel, then called his girlfriend Jennifer, who answered quickly. She said she was finished with her day and would wait at her department. Ethan drove to Jennifer's department where she waited in medical scrubs. He asked how she was holding up, and she admitted exhaustion. Ethan joked about her developing a god complex, and she laughed. They drove to Ethan's apartment, showered, changed, and talked as they prepared for the evening. Later, they drove through the city's nightlife, shared a casual meal at a small eatery, and played street games under neon lights. They entered a jewelry store and browsed the displays. Ethan playfully suggested measuring Jennifer's ring finger for a future proposal, but she teased that would spoil the surprise. Ethan fastened a delicate necklace around her neck. Jennifer selected a few pieces, paid with Ethan's card, and they left. On the drive home, Ethan asked if Jennifer would stay at his place. She declined, citing an early practical the next day and concerns about waking tired. Ethan smirked, and Jennifer told him to drop her off at her hostel. He drove her to her dorm. Jennifer kissed him softly goodbye and entered the building. Ethan watched her go inside, smiled, and drove back to his apartment. Ethan entered his apartment, peeled off his clothes, and collapsed onto his bed in just his boxers. He scrolled through his phone, plugged it in to charge, and fell asleep. Sunlight filtered through the window panes. A boy lay beneath his duvet, asleep. He twitched his eyelids, eased himself upward into a seated position, stretched with eyes closed, then murmured a comment about the stretch as his eyes fluttered open and the room came into focus. He whispered a question about how he got there, faltered, and brushed his throat, noticing the change in his voice. His eyes roamed the room, taking in the ornate surroundings and luxurious furniture. He lifted his hands, noting their smaller size and smooth skin, and muttered disbelief at the unfamiliar voice. Ethan's mind raced through scenarios explaining his predicament. He recalled his simple routine: waking up, attending lectures, spending time with his girlfriend Jennifer, then sleeping. Suddenly, he thought about transmigration and questioned its reality. He remembered reading web novels and watching anime but had never wished for such a fate. He acknowledged his life was ideal: wealthy, tall, handsome, intelligent, and dating Jennifer, the most intelligent and charming girl in the medical department. He reflected on growing up in an orphanage but having no desire to uncover his roots. Memories of Jennifer flooded his mind: her laughter, glances during lectures, and the warmth of her hand. He recalled their 2-year relationship without arguments or need for space, which Jennifer had named Utopia. He wished to return to his world and accepted his situation despite its surreal nature. He worried about Jennifer's heartbreak and confusion when his body was found or reported missing. Ethan lay back on the bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, his thoughts tangled in disbelief and acceptance. He considered typical transmigration tropes of bloodshed, battles, and family drama, realizing they did not apply to him. Minutes passed as he lay motionless. Driven by curiosity or dread, he pushed himself off the bed and walked to the full-length mirror. He stared at his reflection. A young man about 17 years old, tall at 6 feet 1 inch, with fair, flawless skin, deep purple eyes matching tousled hair, and sharp, attractive features. He thought dryly that the face was a lady killer but questioned the absence of memories accompanying transmigration. His gaze drifted to the closed door, tempted to open it but remained cautious due to lack of memory or context. He inferred from the room's opulence and his appearance that the body belonged to someone of noble status. He decided to wait for a maid or butler to gather information. Turning toward the window, Ethan froze as a sharp force crashed into his mind, causing violent pain. He staggered, clutching his head bed, knees buckling slightly, and suppressed a scream. Fragments of images flashed in his mind. Unknown scenes, faces, and places now somehow familiar. Minutes passed before the pain faded. He gasped for breath, trembling, and pushed himself upright. His mind reeled from the torrent of memories forced upon him. He realized they were not his but now fused with his consciousness. He had witnessed the life of the soul that once inhabited this body, every experience and scar etched into his mind. He murmured in disbelief that he must be kidding. The ease and privilege of his former life were gone. Chaos, betrayal, blood, and a dangerous legacy lay before him. The body belonged to Asher Wargrave, the 10th son of the Duke of the Zerathorn Empire, a family known for their martial prowess and hardened by generations of conflict. Asher was 16, soon to turn 17, commanding respect as the Duke's son but facing expectations beyond mere birthright. Every member of the Wargrave family was a prodigy. Mediocrity had no place among them. Being talented was not enough. He was expected to be extraordinary. In this world, every individual underwent an awakening at 15, a rite of passage that granted power, but success was not guaranteed. Each person had 3 attempts at 15, 16, and 17. Failure meant remaining ordinary and powerless. Asher had failed his awakening at 15, beginning his fall from grace. His family ridiculed him, his siblings mocked him, and even the servants regarded him with disdain. He did not yield but endured, pushing his body beyond limits through relentless discipline. At 16, during his second chance at awakening, all eyes watched expectantly, but he failed again. The second failure broke him. He retreated to his room, shut out the world, and drowned his sorrow in alcohol. His siblings' cutting words continued to chip away at him until he finally broke. One morning, he paid a maid to procure a drug without explanation. That night, he swallowed it, choosing escape over endurance. Asher Wargrave died alone, defeated by expectation and silence rather than enemies. Ethan felt Asher's emotions flood him: joy, determination, sorrow, despair, and death. He approached a small table holding a half-full bottle of the drug and a stained letter. Without reading, he discarded the bottle and shredded the letter. Though he had lived through Asher's final moments, the sorrow and fear belonged to Asher, not to him. Ethan noticed no memories of this world within Asher's past. Outside, the compound displayed discipline and order. Armored guards patrolled the perimeter with precision, and maids and butlers moved silently along the walkways. Tall, elegant trees spiraled across the landscape, giving the estate a cultivated beauty. Ethan wondered whether jumping from the window would truly end his life or if time would rewind to the moment he awoke in this body. Unlike those who rejoiced in a second chance, Ethan's thoughts took a darker, more curious path. Ethan pondered whether the force behind reincarnation would intervene if someone chose to throw away a new life immediately, questioning if it would stop them or let them die without resistance or purpose. He felt no attachment to the life he had inherited from Asher, and the real question lingered in his mind about whether it would end, if he would return to Jennifer, or wake up again in Asher's bed as if nothing had happened. The temptation to test the theory arose from curiosity rather than despair. Ethan muttered to himself that he expected to hear a system activation sound after gaining his memories, wondering if he was the only transmigrator without a system, and decided to wait for his activation. He stepped away from the window, brushing off unease, and wondered why no maid had come to check on him after over 30 minutes. A gentle knock came at the door, and Ethan called for the person to enter. A woman in a maid's uniform, appearing to be in her 40s, entered, closed the door behind her, and bowed politely. She greeted Ethan as young master without meeting his eyes. Ethan recognized her as Lyra, the personal maid assigned by the Duke to serve and protect the young master until awakening. Lyra stepped forward to begin removing Ethan's clothes, but he stopped her, stating he would bathe himself from now on. Lyra paused in confusion, then stepped back with a respectful bow, acknowledging his command. Ethan rose from the bed and went to the bathroom, guided by his memories. After some time, he emerged refreshed, and Lyra waited with a fresh set of clothes. Ethan took the garments and dressed himself without interaction. He asked if his father was in the estate. Lyra confirmed the Primarch was present. Ethan nodded and asked which alcohol she would prefer to bring him. He recalled that Asher had turned to drinking daily after failing the second awakening and decided to forbid alcohol before his third and final awakening. Lyra studied him intently, sensing his determination had returned. She acknowledged his command and promised to bring breakfast shortly before leaving the room. Ethan turned away from the mirror, sank into a chair, and began planning his next moves, confident he would pass the awakening. He considered that Asher had taken his own life days before the final awakening, resigned to failure. Ethan refrained from judging Asher, recognizing everyone faced reality differently, and chose not to carry Asher's burdens of despair and revenge. Lyra returned, pushing a cart with food, arranged the dishes neatly on the table before Ethan. Ethan told her to return in 20 minutes, lifted his cutlery, and began to eat. He planned to start start with the library after breakfast, seeking answers since no information about the world had come with the memories. His movements followed the refined etiquette of nobility ingrained in Asher's body. He wondered silently what cliché twists the world might hold: demons invading, dungeons appearing, or a towering spire with deadly trials. Time passed quickly, and Ethan dabbed his mouth with the table napkin, signaling he had finished his meal. The door creaked open behind him as Lyra entered exactly 20 minutes later. Lyra cleared the table, gathering the empty dishes and placing them onto the cart. Ethan told her to have another maid handle the cart, explaining that they were going to the family library. He rose smoothly from his chair. Lyra acknowledged his command, released the cart, opened the door, and Ethan strode through without hesitation. Ethan's eyes scanned the grand hall as he walked, though Lyra, a few steps behind, did not notice his subtle expression. Ethan's gaze briefly settled on a maid approaching ahead. He masked his features with indifference, imitating Asher's stoic demeanor. The maid greeted Ethan respectfully as the 10th son, but he offered no reply and walked past her without a glance. Lyra asked why they were heading to the library, maintaining a respectful distance. Ethan explained calmly that his final chance at awakening was only days away, and that if he failed, he would be cast out from the family. He said he was going to the library to find a suitable place to live should that outcome occur. Ethan concealed the truth that he intended to study the world's lore and gather information, weaving a lie into his words. Lyra remained silent, feeling the weight of his words but unable to respond. Ethan admired the grandeur around him, his mind drifting to fantasies of wealth as they continued walking. They arrived at the grand entrance of the library when a mocking voice addressed Ethan. As the 10th son, Ethan turned to see Thalric Wargrave, the 9th son, smirking with disdain. Ethan recalled from Asher's memories that Thalric had tormented Asher with sharp words, never physical violence due to the Primarch's decree forbidding suns and moons from touching outside official duels. Thalric sneered that Ethan had finally emerged from hiding, confident he would pass the awakening. Ethan ignored the taunt, withdrew a handkerchief from his chest pocket, raised it to cover his nose and mouth, and walked past Thalric into the library with calm indifference. Thalric stood frozen, stunned by the gesture. Lyra followed Ethan with a faint, knowing smile, recognizing this as the first time Asher had dared to stand his ground. No words were exchanged, but the impact was clear. Ethan stepped into the grand library, recalling his recent encounter with the enigmatic 9th son and comparing it to the young masters he had read about in novels. He wondered why these scions of influential families wasted their time tormenting others instead of enjoying their privileges. He thought he probably would not see the 9th son again, as it seemed the man was leaving the library. He approached a table where a man with black and silver hair and piercing green eyes sat carelessly with his legs on the table, flipping through a magazine without looking up. Ethan greeted the man respectfully as Great Elder. The Great Elder lifted his head slowly, appraised Ethan with a steady gaze, and remarked that it had been a while and wondered what brought Ethan to his domain. Ethan replied that he was simply there to read. The Great Elder responded that anyone who enters a library comes to read and suggested there was nothing left to keep Ethan, briefly glancing at Lyra before returning to his magazine. The Great Elder mused that there was something different about Ethan. Ethan moved deliberately through the library's aisles and told Lyra she could wait or explore while he returned in a few hours. Lyra nodded silently and watched him. Ethan murmured that he would begin with world history and then branch out to other subjects. He retrieved an old heavy book titled History of the World, settled on the floor with his back against the bookshelf, opened the book and began to read. He absorbed the knowledge with ease. Ethan reflected that his intelligence allowed him to maintain a flawless 5.0 CGPA and study medical textbooks to help Jennifer. He recalled that Asher had never been seen engrossed in a book, having spent 11 years on continuous physical training. Ethan flipped through the thick book, absorbed its contents within minutes, and frowned slightly as he closed it, processing what he had read. The world he had transmigrated into was called Crymora, which appeared ordinary and lacked technological advancement. Crymora had no nobles, kings, emperors, empires, or divisions, and no gods ruling over it. Crime existed but was swiftly punished by authorities. Ethan read that around 20,000 years ago, a star fragment had fallen from the sky, striking Crymora and emitting a pulse of energy encircling the planet. Witnesses found only a deep sinkhole at the impact site. The pulse had set in motion a profound transformation. Over time, people sensed an unfamiliar presence, and some awakened abilities that altered their existence. Crime surged as individuals wielded powers without restraint, but justice rose to meet the challenge. The upheaval was attributed to the star fragment. Ethan learned that the star fragment's influence extended beyond awakening powers, affecting animals and plants. Creatures grew larger, stronger, and more monstrous, tearing through cities and extinguishing lives. Even those with new abilities were powerless against them. Plants grew taller, leaves deepened in color, fruits sweetened, and crops flourished. finished, Ethan read that in Crymora, life was believed to be defined by the soul, which generated emotions like happiness, sorrow, anger, love, and hope. The soul and body were inseparable. The star fragment's pulse shattered the balance within the soul, causing emotions to spill into reality and manifest within Crymora itself. The living emotions differed from previous beasts or monsters. They exhibited greater savagery and cunning, embodying a primal intelligence that heightened their terror. A new level of devastation began, with unending war causing death tolls to soar into the millions, lands to lie in ruin, and civilizations to teeter on extinction. Humanity faced annihilation. Humans fought back, hunting down the living emotions and obliterating monsters and beasts, refusing to surrender. Crymora burned fiercely, the planet seeming on the verge of collapse under chaos. From destruction arose creation, and from death blossomed life. Years passed as Crymora was rebuilt, civilization resurrected from ashes. Individuals with abilities and powers became common. Walls were erected, divisions formed, empires rose, and emperors ascended. Nobles claimed their places in the new world. The war persisted as monsters born from normal animals endured, and the living emotions still roamed the land. Names were given. The emotions given life became known as the Emovira, and the energy harnessed by people for their abilities was called Astra, honoring its celestial origin. For mighty empires spanned the world, each commanding territories and wielding distinct power. The hierarchy placed the emperor at the top, followed by dukes, marquis, counts, viscounts, and barons. The four empires, Zerathorn, Thalvern, Velkarin, and Vandross, ruled the west, north, south, and east respectively. Ethan absorbed the weight of history, the star fragment, the evolution of life, emotions given form, death, carnage, and humanity on the brink of annihilation. He felt helplessness wash over him and briefly considered whether the entity that reincarnated him punished him for his previously easy life. He mused that praying might help him fail his awakening and avoid the endless cycle of conflict. He acknowledged that in every novel he encountered, reincarnation or transmigration inevitably led to battle, regardless of choice. He resolved that possessing power and choosing inaction was better than being powerless and idle. He stood, determined that his family would not permit inaction, and vowed to gather power and ascend to the pinnacle of the world to live on his own terms. Ethan scanned the shelves for his next read and chose a tome about the awakening he was to undergo in a few days. He leafed through its pages, noting that awakening unlocked one's astral veins and innate talents or abilities, and that this world did not rely on mana or mana cores. The awakening forcibly activated dormant astral veins within the body, which served as reservoirs storing astra. He decided to learn more about the Wargrave family and spent several minutes poring over volumes mentioning the Wargrave ducal lineage. A whistle escaped him in admiration. The Wargraves were renowned for their brutal approach. Fight first, think later. Wherever the Emovira lurked, the Wargraves followed. They thrived on conflict, living and dying by battle. The Wargrave family was one of the prestigious bloodline families within the Zerathorn Empire. Upon awakening, every Wargrave summoned a soul weapon unique to their soul. These weapons did not need to be carried constantly. After use, they returned seamlessly to the wielder's spirit. Soul weapons were bound intrinsically to their owners, could not be stolen or sealed, and were indestructible. When a Wargrave fell, their soul weapon perished with them. Awakening a soul-bound weapon signified exceptional innate talent in that combat form. Each Wargrave also awakened a singular elemental affinity linked to their weapon. Additionally, Wargraves possessed naturally superior physiques, with strength, speed, stamina, and resilience surpassing nearly all others. Ethan realized why Asher never trained with any weapon before awakening. No one knew which weapon they would summon, so everyone focused on building physique first. He found it odd that Asher had spent 11 years building muscle and endurance without touching a blade. Ethan noted that even after a year wasted drowning in alcohol, Asher's body remained fit. He acknowledged that the Wargraves possessed a weapon, an element, and a physique. Ethan slid a thick book onto the shelf, accepting his clear and unforgiving fate. Kill or be killed in this world and family. He resumed walking through the aisles, eyes drifting over countless book spines, though he had no intention of returning to the library after today. He reflected that after awakening, people could draw astra from the air into their astra veins, essentially cultivating. No cultivation manuals existed. Everyone drew astra at their own pace without standardized paths or structured techniques. Abilities manifested randomly during awakening, and classifications like mage or healer did not apply. Everyone was naturally fit, with astra passively enhancing strength, speed, stamina, and durability from birth. Astra veins acted as conduits, constantly reinforcing the body. Hours passed until Ethan stopped, noticing Lyra standing a short distance away. He remarked that she did not bother reading anything and just followed him. Lyra replied that she had lived a long time, long enough to have read more books than she cared to count, and stepped 2 paces behind him. Ethan resumed walking, considering considering that the stronger someone was, the longer they tended to live, though no path to immortality through cultivation existed. He thought immortals might find eternal life boring. He arrived at the table where the Great Elder had last been seated. The Great Elder asked if Ethan had finished reading and noted that 7 hours in the library was a new record for his first visit. Ethan responded that he would be awakening soon and wanted to learn some world history beforehand. The Great Elder nodded slowly and returned to his book, signaling the end of their conversation. Ethan left the library, reflecting on the Wargrave family's rigid hierarchy. The Primarch at the top, followed by elders, the Primarch's siblings, and above them the Great Elders, the Primarch's uncles and aunts. Only the Primarch could bear an heir. Any elder or Great Elder with children faced execution alongside their offspring to prevent internal strife and maintain bloodline purity. Women were forbidden from marrying or having children unless they were the Primarch. Ethan wondered what would happen if the current Primarch were impotent and recalled records of 3 family members who had secretly born children but were executed with their children. He wandered the halls aimlessly, questioning the family he had reincarnated into. Guided by Asher's memories, Ethan reached the training grounds where guards sparred with such speed that he could only see after images. Their strikes created sparks as blades collided. One guard balanced on a single fingertip under the sun. Ethan watched for 30 minutes without blinking, captivated by their display of strength and discipline. The sparring guards stopped and approached Ethan, bowing respectfully and greeting him as 10th Sunday. Ethan nodded in acknowledgement, praised their work briefly, and walked away. The guards showed loyalty and respect, unlike some maids who cast disdainful glances at Asher. Ethan circled the building multiple times, avoiding other sons and moons of the Wargrave family to prevent encounters before his awakening. As evening fell, Ethan returned to his room. Lyra arrived shortly after with dinner, having known Ethan had spent the day reading or wandering and not bringing lunch. Ethan sat on the bed edge, gazing at the moon outside the window. He resolved to fully embrace Asher if he never woke in his old world. He lay down and pulled the duvet over himself, surrendering to sleep. For days passed since Ethan's transmigration. He accepted the new world, the family, and Asher as himself, though his core remained unchanged. Asher had mostly stayed in his room, limiting outside interaction and growing somewhat closer to Lyra, but their relationship remained master and servant. Rumors began circulating that Asher had emerged after a year of isolation, with talk of his presence in the library and a subtle change in demeanor. Thalric, the 9th son, spread malicious rumors that Asher had harassed maids and that his library visits were a scheme to learn martial arts techniques to sell before his banishment. Lyra's name circulated among the rumors, entwined with Asher's fate. Bound by duty and oath, she was destined to follow him through disgrace and exile until his awakening. Despite her formidable power, her status diminished under the weight of loyalty. Asher commanded Lyra to stand guard outside Ethan's door from dawn until dusk, a precaution grounded in realism. He knew the Wargraves forbade killing or striking one another outside formal duels, but assassination attempts could still occur in secret. Without evidence, reporting such attempts would yield no justice. Asher lay beneath a crimson duvet in his room as sunlight filtered through the curtains. His violet eyes opened, and he sat up, recalling Jennifer from his fading dream. He acknowledged that he would eventually have to let go of her despite her being his first love. He rose, drew aside the curtain, and let sunlight fall across his face. He noted the time on the clock before heading to the bathroom to prepare for the day's event, the awakening on his 17th birthday. No one had come to wish him a happy birthday. Asher anticipated meeting family members during the awakening, including the Primarch, Great Elders, Sons, and Moons. Attendance had been mandatory for his first awakening, less so for the second, and now he doubted many would appear. Still, the thought quickened his heart. He spoke to himself, determined to turn this world into his easy mode. After his bath, he emerged with a towel around his waist and invited Lyra in. He dressed in tailored black trousers, an ash-colored embroidered shirt, and polished black shoes, insisting on an understated yet distinguished appearance. Lyra entered, handed him the day's attire, and then presented a small square box containing a wristwatch. Asher accepted the gift, noting it was the first time Lyra had given him anything. He fastened the watch on his wrist, expressing appreciation. Lyra observed silently and said she was glad the gift pleased him. Asher joked about saving money due to their impending banishment. Lyra expressed confidence that he would awaken and prove others wrong. Asher replied he had nothing to prove to anyone and moved toward the chair where he took breakfast. Lyra informed him breakfast would be served shortly before leaving the room. Ethan ate the meal Lyra had brought him moments before and mused silently about his 4 days without phones, games, or internet. Asher finished quickly, rose from his seat, approached the door, paused, took a deep breath, then opened the door and stepped outside. Lyra waited just outside and observed his emergence. Asher asked if they should proceed, then turned toward the chamber where the awakening would take place. Asher spotted a maid along the way, gestured for her to clear his room, noting the plates left behind. After a short walk, he arrived before a massive black door guarded by 2 men. The guards bowed and greeted him as the 10th son Asher nodded in return. The guards wished him success as the door opened automatically. Asher stepped inside, Lyra following. He walked calmly into the hall, where a 1-meter-tall pedestal held a white, crystal-like orb suspended above it. Rising tiers of seats encircled the chamber, filled with figures bearing distinct hair and eye colors, all exuding menace. These were the witnesses to Asher's final awakening. Asher counted silently the presence of 2 great elders, 3 sons, and 1 moon, noting the absence of the primarch and his wife. Lyra retreated to a distant corner, standing silently. A heavy silence filled the hall as all eyes fixed on Asher. Among the spectators, Thalric sat with a sardonic smile, convinced of Asher's inevitable failure. The door behind Asher opened, revealing Zarek, the Primarch's personal butler and trusted right-hand man, dressed impeccably. Zarek entered with calm and a subtle smile. Asher learned from Lyra that Zarek wielded great influence within the Wargrave family despite his title, having saved the Primarch's life multiple times and commanding respect through fear of the Primarch's wrath. Zarek apologized for his lateness, explaining he had been delayed by another matter. Asher responded that a short delay was no problem. Zarek approached the pedestal and asked if Asher wished him to explain the process. Asher declined and said to begin. Asher raised his hand deliberately toward the orb, took a deep breath, and touched it. All eyes focused on him, waiting. Seconds passed with the orb inert and cold, causing murmurs of disbelief. Thalric's smile deepened in confidence. Zarek prepared to announce failure, but before he could speak, the orb flared to life, glowing intensely and releasing powerful waves of Astra energy. Asher felt energy surge within him as a golden aura flickered around him, signaling the awakening of his Astra veins. The orb's glow faded back to dormancy. Asher smiled. Zarek congratulated Asher and welcomed him to the path of the strong. Asher thanked him. Zarek then turned and left. Whispers spread among the elders and great elders, relieved that Asher had succeeded and spared the family's honor. The librarian Asher had met 4 days prior remained present. The sun and moon figures rose silently and left with their maids, without acknowledging Asher. One son lingered, watching Asher with a faint, knowing smile. Thalric's smug expression turned to a deep frown. He stood quietly and exited the hall. None of the great elders, sons, or moon inquired about the weapon or element Asher had awakened, doubting how far someone who had failed twice could rise on the path of power. Lyra watched her young master awaken with a subtle smile, but fell silent as Zarek approached. When he drew near, her smile vanished, and she greeted him composedly. Zarek stated that with the 10th son awakened, she must choose whether to continue serving him personally or return to the circle. Lyra chose to serve the 10th son until death. Zarek nodded, handed her a document, and instructed her to have Asher sign it and return it by tomorrow. He then left. Lyra slipped the document into her space ring and nodded. Asher stood firm, a faint smile on his lips, as a subtle ding echoed in his mind, signaling a system activation. He prepared to explore the new interface and confirm his awakened weapon and element. Footsteps echoed ahead, and Asher looked up to see the first son, Malric Wargrave, approaching with deliberate strides. Malric stopped before Asher, lowered himself to Asher's eye level, and placed a firm yet gentle hand atop his head, congratulating him on his awakening. Asher, momentarily stunned, forced a polite smile and thanked Malric, addressing him by his title. Malric dismissed the formality, revealing himself as Asher's elder brother and urging him to call him Malric. Asher nodded, inwardly disbelieving the cordiality. Malric explained he came simply to witness Asher's awakening. They began walking side by side, followed at a respectful distance by Lyra and Malric's butler. Asher recalled Malric had been present at all his previous awakenings. Lyra had shared insights about Malric, describing him as an enigma who smiled disarmingly at all, but whose smile was believed to mask a dangerous reality. Asher asked Malric what would have happened if he hadn't awakened. Malric said he always knew Asher would awaken but planned to take him under his wing if he had not. Asher asked why, and Malric replied simply that he cared for his sibling, patting Asher's head again. Asher gently removed the hand, smoothed his hair, and they resumed walking in contemplative silence. They arrived at Asher's door and paused. Asher asked if Malric was curious about the weapon and element he had awakened. Malric admitted curiosity but preferred to wait until Asher mastered control and could wield it in battle, suggesting they might spar then. Asher nodded in acceptance. Malric then raised his hand, summoned a rectangular wooden talisman from his ring, and extended it to Asher, instructing him to infuse it with his Astra if he ever needed aid, promising to arrive without delay. Asher accepted the talisman from Malric, examined its intricate craftsmanship, and then inquired if Malric was leaving. Malric nodded slowly and told Asher that Wargraves did not waste time idling, advising him to train hard or perish from unknown threats, then turned and walked away with calm, measured strides. Asher watched Malric and his butler retreat down the corridor and allowed himself a genuine smile, thanking Malric as his big brother. Malric halted, turned slightly, smiled subtly, replied that it was any time, then vanished without walking further. Asher wondered if Malric could teleport or if his speed was extraordinary, stepped into his room, and sank onto the edge of his bed, lost in thought. Lyra stood silently by his side until Asher looked at her and told her she could leave as he needed to review the changes after the awakening. Lyra stepped forward, materialized the file Zarek had entrusted to her in her palm, and handed it to Asher. He scanned the contents, noticing Lyra's signature at the bottom left. He quietly asked if she was certain she wished to remain his permanent maid, explaining that once he signed the document, he alone would have authority over her, even the Primarch would be powerless. Lyra replied with a respectful bow that she would remain. Asher nodded, took a pen, signed the document, handed the file back to her, and instructed her not to stand by the door this time but to return to her quarters. Lyra accepted the file and departed with a faint smile. Now alone, Asher mentally summoned the system. The system acknowledged the host, assimilated, and booted the interface, displaying his name as Asher Wargrave, age 17, bloodline Wargrave lineage, titles youngest heir, 10th son, disgrace of the Wargrave, life rank faint star, sub-life rank dust, affinity lightning, and stats showing doubled strength, agility, vitality, and perception. Asher studied the life rank progression from faint star to crown star and the sub-rank progression from dust to radiant. He noted his newfound lightning affinity, raised his right hand, and summoned lightning dancing around his fingertips, fueled by Astra energy. Understanding that control would vanish once Astra was depleted, he smiled at the impossible feat of commanding nature's forces with ease and anticipated future battles. He questioned if the Wargrave bloodline was turning him into a battle fanatic but acknowledged the joy of wielding supernatural power. Asher reviewed his attributes, noting the doubling of all stats except perception, which lagged due to lack of sensory training. He felt Astra energy coursing through his body and reflected that greater Astra flow raised life rank. He read the note about the Wargrave family surpassing natural human limits, the 50% increase in physical stats, and the existence of skills and techniques to amplify power. He regretted the original Asher's wasted year in alcohol and smiled at the system's inventory feature, thinking he needed a space ring to conceal it. He tested the talisman by making it vanish and reappear with a thought, nodded in satisfaction, and made the system interface vanish. Preparing to discover his awakened weapon, he felt a deep stirring as if the weapon were calling him. The system interface abruptly reappeared, signaling the distribution of a newbie package and prompting him to open it. Asher stopped abruptly as the system interface appeared again before him in the bathroom. He scanned the notification and paused, surprised by its contents. The system prompted him to open the newbie package. He thought the system had offered little tangible benefit so far, mostly displaying stats and granting unlimited inventory access. Yet, he felt excitement at the prospect of the newbie gifts, known from countless novels as overpowered starter packs. He commanded the system to open the package immediately. The system confirmed and began opening it, notifying him that he had received the absolute physique. Asher read each notification carefully, determined not to skip anything. He requested the system to display details of the absolute physique, expecting something powerful. The system replied that the details could not be displayed until he completed assimilation. He frowned, recalling that assimilation usually involved pain and transformation. He went to the bathroom, stripped to his boxers, and sat in a lotus position on the tiled floor. He bit down on a cloth to prepare for the expected torment and commanded the system to begin assimilation. The system affirmed, and a surge of energy exploded within Asher's body. His veins bulged, muscles tensed, bones groaned, ligaments stretched, and his brain pulsed. His Astra veins expanded and contracted violently, refining themselves. The small trace of Astra from his awakening swelled and grew denser. Despite expecting agony, Asher felt serenity wash over him. The world appeared brighter and clearer, his mind sharpened, and his heartbeat pulsed with quiet joy. The pain never came. Instead, comfort embraced him as his body rebuilt itself smoothly. The energy faded, and Asher found himself grounded in the present. He sat quietly, savoring the lingering echoes of the transformation. He rose slowly, feeling energized beyond his previous awakening. A glance in the mirror revealed he had grown from 6 feet 1 inch to 6 feet 3 inches. His skin now radiated unnatural perfection. He noted his lean body held compressed strength beneath the surface. His voice deepened as he commanded the system to display his status. The system displayed his updated profile. Name Asher Wargrave, age 17, bloodline the Wargrave lineage, physique absolute physique, titles including youngest heir, 10th son, disgrace of the Wargrave, unique body holder new, life rank faint star, sub sub-life rank Spark, Affinity Lightning, Strength 26 to 52, Agility 26 to 52, Vitality 28 to 56, Perception 18 to 50. He scanned the details, noting the addition of Absolute Physique and a new title. His sub-life rank had advanced to Spark shortly after awakening. He sensed Astra pulsing vividly through his veins but lamented it could not be measured numerically. He smiled, realizing every stat had doubled again, as during his awakening. He joked that at this rate he might become a god by morning. His eyes focused on his perception stat, which had leapt from 18 to 50. Suddenly aware, he realized he could perceive everything within a 5-meter radius with crystal clarity. He tested this by closing his eyes and found his heightened perception remained flawless despite the darkness. He joked to the system about being spoiled and considered marrying it. Asher commanded the system to show him the details of the Absolute Physique. The system confirmed and displayed the description and abilities: perfect muscle memory, optimal movement efficiency, limitless physical growth, instinctive adaptation, battle intuition, and omniperception. He examined each ability carefully and realized the Absolute Physique granted him extraordinary advantages. Perfect muscle memory allowed him to master any weapon or martial technique after 1 or 2 attempts, surpassing even seasoned experts. His reaction time and precision would improve drastically, even under exhaustion. Battle intuition enhanced his instincts to understand enemy movements subconsciously. Though he lagged behind his peers in other respects, the Absolute Physique erased much of that gap by boosting his physical stats and Astra reserves beyond normal limits for his life rank. Asher acknowledged that while his control over Astra and elemental manipulation remained weak due to his recent awakening, the Absolute Physique could quickly close that gap. He reflected on how Astra capacity varied among individuals with the same life rank and noted some rare abilities allowed wielders to harness far greater amounts. He dismissed comparisons, recalling that the Wargrave had confined him within their household until his awakening, so he had no true peers. He decided to learn about the weapon next. After dressing and confirming no trace of the black goo he had imagined, he returned to his room. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he focused on the faint call he had sensed earlier. Within seconds, a flash of white light accompanied the appearance of a weapon in his hand. He inspected the weapon, a long rapier with a refined silver sheen and a slender frame. Its tip was razor-sharp and tapered for precision thrusts. The edges bore jagged, serrated notches designed to tear through flesh and armor. The rapier trembled faintly as if alive, resonating with him. His fingers traced its surface, and the connection between them grew stronger. The weapon began to hum softly, echoing the bond forming. Asher requested the system to provide details on the rapier. The system responded that it did not disclose information on unrelated items but granted compliance since the rapier was linked to his soul. The system explained it resided within his soul rather than his mind, offering certain benefits. Asher questioned why the system had not informed him earlier. The system replied that he had not asked. When Asher inquired if there was anything else to know, the system answered negatively. He then requested to see the benefits the system offered. The system displayed Mind Shield, granting immunity to all mental interference, and Soul Guard, protecting his soul from all attacks and manipulations. Asher acknowledged that with this protection, he was no longer vulnerable to mental intrusion or soul attacks, abilities that were rare and usually kept secret. He dismissed further thoughts on the matter and asked the system again for the rapier's details. The system complied. The system explained that the rapier was a soul-bound weapon awakened through the host's affinity for the sword, existing beyond conventional form and limitations as a manifestation of the host's will and essence. It granted 3 abilities: Position Marker, allowing the host to teleport instantly to any of 3 marked locations with unlimited range, no cooldown, no Astra cost, and immunity to. Asher noted the rapier's abilities covered essential aspects: teleportation for swift movement or escape, an Astra reserve for energy, and healing vital in a world where such skills were rare and innate. The rapier hummed softly in his grasp, and Asher sensed their bond deepening. He decided to name the weapon Virilis, and upon speaking the name, the rapier floated effortlessly at his side. Asher observed the floating blade calmly and inquired with the system about this change but received no response. He considered the advantages of a weapon capable of independent movement, such as acting as a silent guardian during surprise attacks or assassination attempts. Asher allowed Virilis to continue floating beside him and shifted his focus to cultivation. Sitting in a lotus position, he closed his eyes and actively drew Astra from the air through his skin pores into his Astra veins. He felt Astra flowing through his spinal vein, which redistributed it to veins throughout his body, including the heart, brain, limbs, liver, kidneys, lungs, eyes, solar plexus, and palms. Hours passed as Astra flowed through him, and Asher felt his internal structure subtly adjust. His Astra veins contracted and strengthened before expanding gently. When he opened his eyes, he saw Virilis floating beside him and realized he had broken through through in cultivation faster than expected. He asked the system if this was due to his absolute physique, and the system affirmed it. Asher reviewed his system panel and noted the increase in his life rank and stats. He considered the benefit his absolute physique provided and thought that his cultivation speed would improve in an astro-rich environment. He observed the differences in stat increments and reasoned that his physique caused the larger increases. As he glanced at the window, he noticed the darkness outside and saw the clock showing 10 p.m. He decided to sleep and slipped under his duvet as Virilis returned to his soul. The next morning, a knock on the door woke Asher in his room. He recognized Lyra and invited her in. She greeted him cheerfully but quickly lost her smile, saying she was glad he had awakened. Asher went to the bathroom for his routine while Lyra handed him clothes and informed him he would meet the Primarch today. Surprised, Asher asked when this was decided and why he was not informed earlier. Lyra explained Mr. Zarek had told her yesterday afternoon, but she had not disturbed him. Asher dressed quickly and asked when the meeting would occur. Lyra said Zarek would arrive by 10 a.m., so the meeting was likely then. Asher instructed her to bring his meal quickly. Lyra left the room, and Asher noticed her swift departure. She returned in less than a minute with breakfast, which Asher ate quickly. At 10 a.m., a knock sounded. Asher nodded to Lyra, who opened the door to Mr. Zarek. Zarek greeted Lyra and then smiled softly at Asher, asking if he was ready. Asher confirmed and followed Zarek out of his room with Lyra behind. They walked through hallways without encountering anyone. Asher noticed his footsteps made no sound, and Zarek and Lyra seemed to notice as well but said nothing. Asher thought about the effects of his absolute physique and mind shield ability on his movements and demeanor. They arrived before a large black door with minimal designs and no guards. Zarek bowed gently and told Asher the Primarch was inside and he could enter alone. Asher nodded and stepped past Zarek. The door opened instantly. Inside, Asher saw shelves filled with books, 2 couches, and a table with documents. A tall man with golden hair and eyes, standing 8 feet 2 inches, held a book and seemed serene and calm. Asher bowed slightly, placing his hand on his chest, and greeted the Primarch. The Primarch congratulated Asher on his awakening and consecutive breakthroughs, noting that the Wargrave bloodline defied the usual mediocrity of third-time awakenings. Asher thanked him and stood straight with hands behind his back. The Primarch asked if Asher knew why he was there. Asher guessed it was for training. The Primarch confirmed and explained that despite Asher's failed awakenings, he would be allowed to train with the firsts as a gift for his breakthrough. Asher expressed gratitude. The Primarch then ordered Asher to show his weapon and element. Asher raised his hand, summoning lightning that coursed through it, and Virilis appeared floating beside him. The Primarch observed Virilis and noted the unique combination of lightning and rapier. He remarked on Asher's rapid connection with his weapon in just a day. He then gave Asher 30 minutes to prepare and informed him that Zarek would escort him to the training ground, expressing hope for Asher's performance during the true awakening before dismissing him. Asher bowed once more, turned, and left the room as the large black door closed behind him. He saw Lyra waiting. Zarek was already gone. Lyra asked how the meeting had gone, and Asher replied that it was good and that the Primarch had reinstated him to the first training ground. Lyra congratulated him, but Asher remained silent and continued walking toward his room. Asher reflected on the Primarch's lack of questions about Virilis's ability and noted how many times he had thanked the Primarch during their meeting. He considered the significance of being sent to the first training ground despite his late awakening, recalling the Wargrave family system of training grounds based on awakening attempts and the tradition of the true awakening ritual involving survival in a wild. Asher removed his clothes in his room, contemplating the upcoming true awakening and the unknown challenges it would bring. He thought about the Wargrave family's harsh tradition and the difference between direct descendants and ordinary recruits in terms of training and rituals. He remained uncertain about what to expect but knew he had 6 months until the true awakening. A knock sounded at the door and Asher invited Lyra in. She entered carrying his training uniform, a form-fitting black compression shirt and trousers. She handed the uniform to Asher, who silently accepted and changed into it. He tested the outfit's fit and approved of its flexibility. Asher sat on his bed, waiting for Zarek, while Virilis returned to his soul. Another knock came. Asher opened the door to find Zarek standing there. Zarek asked if Asher was ready, and Asher nodded in affirmation. Zarek led the way, with Asher following and Lyra trailing silently behind. They exited the building and entered a different sector of the compound, passing armed guards. They arrived at a large structure divided into 3 sections, which Asher inferred to be the 3 training grounds. Zarek remained silent and led Asher through doors into the first training ground. Lyra slipped away quietly to remain nearby but out of sight. Inside the first training ground, they entered a brightly lit room with a table at the center. A man sat behind the table with 2 empty chairs facing him. The man spoke without looking up when the door door opened. Zarek identified himself, and the man, Boris, recognized Zarek and greeted him warmly before noticing Asher standing beside Zarek. Within the Wargrave estate, Boris lowered himself into a respectful bow and greeted Asher as the 10th son. Asher responded with a curt nod. Boris asked Zarek how he could assist him today and gestured for both men to sit. Zarek crossed one leg over the other, interlocked his fingers on his knee, and took a seat beside Asher. Zarek stated that he was there to register the 10th son in the first training ground. Boris explained that he had no authority to enroll Asher, as it would violate family law and cost him his position. Zarek produced a folded parchment scroll, a direct order from the Primarch granting the registration as a reward for Asher's life rank despite awakening only a day ago, and handed it to Boris. Boris unfolded the scroll, read it carefully, and noted the Primarch's seal. He acknowledged Asher's exceptional life rank, comparable only to the current Primarch's breakthrough. Asher asked Zarek if controlling his presence related to his mastery over Astra. Zarek replied that the ability to control presence depended on the Aura 1 projected, not the amount of Astra, and that sensing actual Astra levels was rare. Asher closed his eyes and focused inward. After a few seconds, he opened his eyes and his aura vanished completely. Zarek and Boris exchanged glances and smiled faintly, recognizing Asher's instinctive skill at concealing his life rank. Boris welcomed Asher to the first training ground, retrieved a form from a drawer, and handed it to him. Asher accepted it, filled it out quickly, and Zarek rose to leave, stating his part was done. Boris briefed Asher on the structure and expectations of the first training ground, outlining the rules, training schedules, and standards. He described endurance drills and combat simulations designed to temper body and mind. Asher listened silently and committed the details to memory. Boris led Asher through a corridor into a vast courtyard filled with over 100 trainees jogging in formation, many struggling with exhaustion. A man at the forefront shouted commands to keep moving and push beyond limits. The man noticed Boris and Asher, ordered a 5-minute recovery, and approached them with a bow, greeting Asher as the 10th son. Asher nodded in acknowledgement. The man asked Boris what he could do for him. Boris stated that the 10th son was now assigned to the first training ground and then left without further explanation. The man introduced himself as Harold 10th son and said he would be Asher's physical fitness instructor, with sessions running from 7 a.m. to noon. Harold guided Asher toward a clearing where other trainees sat, drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. Asher noted internally that he was already late on the first day as he walked in step with Harold.